Hey guys, so today I'm talking about rodents in your vehicle, and this is a lot more common than you realize. Rodents find a warm place to live in the cooler months such as we're having right now, and they will set up shop there, go out in the early morning as soon as the sun rises. You'll leave in your vehicle, get back home, and they'll go right back to that warm spot. So a lot of people don't realize it, but rodents can nest inside the engine. I'm going to put a picture of one I found in my vehicle that at the time I was parking outside. It was in the vehicle, I didn't even know it, and it could have been there for months, but I'll stick a picture right here so you can take a look at it. But it's not just limited to cars and trucks. It can be RVs, it can be riding mowers, it can even be home generators. So this is a 7-step process or a 7-section process where I talk about how to keep rodents out of those areas and repel them forever so you don't have to worry about major damage on your electrical system, wiring, or even them causing an internal fire in the engine. So before I talk about this section on keeping rodents out of your vehicles, I want to talk a little bit about safety. When you're cleaning out the nest, if you do find a nest, make sure you're wearing eye protection, gloves, and even a face mask, because the rodent hairs can contain diseases. Out in the Southwest, they have, I think it's called hantavirus, and if you breathe that into your lungs, it can be quite bad for your health. So just remember, you want to make sure that you're wearing proper equipment if you do find a nest in your vehicle. And this is the most common time of year that rodents start looking for warm places to build a nest. Now, the first thing I'll talk about is disrupting the scent trails of rodents, and you can do that with a lot of different products, but what I'm recommending first is peppermint oil, pure peppermint oil. I'll put a link in the description to all the products I'm talking about. Now, a lot of people recommend using something like cotton balls. I like taking a kitchen sponge and cutting it into 1-inch lengths and then taping it to an area of the engine that does not get hot. 2 or 3, you can just use one sponge and just cut it into 4, maybe even 5 sections, and then taping it throughout the engine, and then pour the peppermint oil directly on there. This is a smell that I personally like, but there's always a chance that the smell could make its way into the cabin area. So just make sure whatever product I'm using that I'm talking about today, make sure you can tolerate the odor of it. But for me personally, it's no problem if a little bit of that makes it into the engine. So you can tape these to areas that don't get hot and there's no chance of fire, and then just refresh it by doing this about once a week, putting new peppermint oil, and the smell can disrupt the scent trails of the rodents because that's how they find their way in and out of your vehicle. Now, the next repellent I'm going to talk about using is cinnamon and clove, and you can either use powder or liquid and oil, and you're going to put that in a sprayer of about 1 tablespoon to about 1 quart of water of each of those, and you're going to turn it into a spray where you'll spray the tire wells around the tires, the base of the tire, and around the edges of the engine, anywhere that the rodent might make its way into your vehicle. Now, like I said earlier, this not only applies to vehicles, it also applies to things like generators, RVs, and things like that. So the tire wells is the #1 place where these rodents are getting into your vehicle. They're not just randomly jumping from the ground to there, because a lot of them are too small to make it in there. Of course, rats might be able to do that, but the small rodents, field mice, they're actually climbing from the tire. So spraying that directly at the base of the tire where you're parking and in those fender wells, that's going to really help a lot. Now, on a generator, of course, you want to be careful about where you're spraying it. Anything that might get hot, it could put off a smell. So just make sure you're spraying it around the overall compartment and not necessarily on components of the engines that might get superheated. Now, the next is a product that I absolutely hate the smell of, and most mammals do hate the smell of this, is Irish Spring soap. I don't know how anybody uses it. It is so intensely strong. I had some in the greenhouse, but it actually made the entire greenhouse smell like it. I hated it. But anyways, if you do happen to like that smell and have some around, or you just want to purchase it just for this one problem you're having with rodents, you can take these small mesh bags, link in the description, or you can get these at most garden centers. This is made to put over things like apples, pears, and things like that are growing on trees, and it keeps the insects off of them. They're very durable, but you could put maybe a slice of Irish Spring soap inside the bag and then hang it anywhere that you're seeing the rodent problem, possibly in the trunk, the engine well, away from anywhere that's heated, of course, and this smell will repel them as well. I hate the smell myself, so I wouldn't use this personally, but some people actually like the smell. Now, this next product is just vinegar. You can use household vinegar, the really weak stuff, or if you happen to have some of these stronger vinegars, that's really great. Put them in a quart of water, and you can also use apple cider vinegar. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to, again, disrupt the scent trails around the vehicle. So this might be sprayed around the ground area, where if you're parking in an open area, and right around the base of the tires. That will help disrupt the scent trails for the rodents, rats, whatever it is, getting inside of the car, and it will work really well. Again, these solo sprayers, I highly recommend them because you can put out a light mist right around the tire area, and you can push the rodents away from that area where you're parking your vehicle. Now, the next repellent we're talking about is just a common everyday dryer sheet, and the smell of those can be quite strong for rodents. Their sense of smell is a lot better than ours. So you can put these under the seats in the car, the glove box, the trunk, and you can do the trick about taping it to the inside of the engine compartment area as long as it's not on anything hot. Of course, these will become flammable as they dry out, but the oils that they add to these, again, will disrupt the scent trails of most rodents, mice, rats, things like that. So the next item we're talking about is cedar chips, and they contain something called phenols, and that puts out a very strong odor as well. You can get cedar chips at most pet stores. You can order it online. I'll put a link in the description, but the smell can be quite strong for rodents. So you can put these in the glove box, under the seats, in the trunk, and I actually like the smell of these, so this is something that I could tolerate even if the smell was overpowering for most rodents. It wouldn't bother me at all. And also, you can also put these pouches in the engine compartment, and again, just tape it to a certain spot that does not get hot, and that smell again can disrupt the scent trails of most rodents. So the next product I'm going to recommend is not something that you would use in an everyday driver. This might be an RV that's sitting, possibly a car that you don't drive very often, but it's ammonia, and you can put that again on these type of kitchen sponges, tape it to wherever the problem is. Make sure you don't put too much because it can be overpowering. So just anything where you're not doing it as an everyday driver, ammonia will work excellent in any type of generator, power equipment, lawnmower, RV, anything that you're not using on a daily amount, because this smell can be so powerful it can cause even humans to become nauseous. Now, this next product I'm going to recommend is something you can purchase online or at your local hardware store, and that is called Snake Away, and it's in usually medium-sized bags. It's not a very large bag, but this smell is such a strong smell of sulfur. I would recommend not putting this in the vehicle any place, but putting it around the tires of wherever you park the vehicle. If you park in the same place every day, this is an excellent item to put out. It will not only keep snakes away, but any rodents that get close to this, it's going to drive them out of that area, including cats and dogs, because it is extremely powerful. Now, before I move on to the next section, I wanted to talk a little bit about this PDF I've created. It's 13 pages and 250 tips, hacks, and tricks to keep rodents out of all the before mentioned products, vehicles, and generators and things like that. But this is 13 pages. It will help you with all the problems with rodents around your home, your garage, wherever you're parking your vehicles. I'll put a link in the description to the Patreon. If you're already a member, you can get this for absolutely free. If you're not a member, just a few dollars, and you can download it, and you can store it on your phone, your device, or even print it out into a hard copy. Now, moving on to the next section, I'm going to talk about sanitation and food control. If you keep any type of food product, whether it's cough drops or an energy bar, anything that's edible in your vehicle, make sure you put it in some plastic containers and make sure that you seal it properly, because rodents can smell even the smallest amount of food, and they'll get into those items, chew into them. They, like I said, even things like, you wouldn't think about it, but medications that are left in a vehicle can have edible components. So it might kill the mice if they consume it, but they will get into it and maybe even take up housekeeping in your car. So just make sure that you're sealing any food products properly. Now, even if you park inside, a lot of people think they park in a garage and they don't have to worry about rodents, but that's not true. Even the best made garage doors, there can be just enough of a gap for a small mice or rat to just squeeze under, and there's a lot of openings. Sometimes it could be dryer vents, electrical things coming in, but I recommend that if you have any type of pet food in your garage or storage building where you keep your power equipment, and even in RVs, make sure you're putting any pet foods inside of a container like this. A lot of times we don't think about it, but pet foods can be an eternal food supply for rats and mice. So just remember, you want to make sure it's in a container that they cannot get into, and make sure that it's properly secured on the top. Now, just another quick mention about RVs. A lot of people don't go through their RV thoroughly and make sure there's nothing edible. So just make sure you go through cabinet by cabinet, everywhere in the RV, glove boxes, make sure there's no potential food items, because once a rodent finds a food item in a vehicle, they're going to come back to that area because there's a memory they have of finding something edible, so they'll just keep coming back over and over. So again, if you are going to leave food items inside of an RV, make sure that everything is properly sealed. I know I'm kind of repeating myself with the sealing, but that is critical, because that's a lot of times the first stage of a rodent getting into a vehicle. Warmth is, of course, a secondary issue for them, but the primary issue, they're coming in to look for a food item. Now, in the summertime, we feed birds, and we have several bird feeders around the property. But one thing I would say, never put a bird feeder anywhere near where you're parking an RV or a car for long-term storage, or even overnight. In the summer months, in the cooler months, you still have birds that are going to feed off them, and even some winter birds will feed off bird feeders. So just make sure that you're parking nowhere near a bird feeder, because that can draw in rodents at night. Yes, the birds are there during the daytime, but at nighttime, all that bird seed on the ground is going to attract a lot of rodents, and they might feel the warmth coming from your vehicle if you've just driven it, or if they're just looking for a place to store away some of that bird seed, they can add it to their nest and just take over a stored vehicle very quickly. Now, when I first moved into my home over 25 years ago, I used to have my trash cans in the garage, and I noticed there was something getting into the trash cans, and I discovered it was a small mouse had gotten in there and was chewing open the bag, so they were making their way in there. So one rule of thumb is don't put your trash cans in your garage. Keep them at least 30 to 50 feet away from your vehicles. Put them away maybe at the other end of the yard or driveway. But one of those things that will really attract rodents is trash cans, because there's so much food in there. It's just like a massive buffet for all sorts of rodents. Now, one issue I had a few years ago with my lawnmower, I had bought a bag of grass seed, and it got a little hole in the bottom of it, and I thought it was just a tear, but actually a small field mouse had made his way in there and was feeding off of the grass seed. So wherever you're having your lawnmower stored, if you have any grass seed or flower seeds, make sure you're storing those in sealed containers like this, because grass seed is very edible, and a lot of different flower seeds are very edible. And once they get into that, they found a food supply, and they might start nesting in your power equipment. So one thing is, if you do a lot of grilling, is a lot of people forget to clean out the grease traps, and that is a very good area for rodents to get into. They find it very edible. There's a strong smell of food coming from there. So if you have a grill anywhere near where you park a vehicle, if you put the grill and you take it and you put it in a storage shed for the winter, that grease can be a food supply for many, many months. So just make sure that you clean out your grease traps from your grill, because that can be a very, very long-term food supply and can lead to issues if you bring that grill into a storage area where you have power equipment, lawnmower, or even inside your garage. So the next section, I'm going to talk about physical barriers and modifying things that will help prevent them from getting in. So taking anything like a very fine mesh like this, they can't chew through it. This type of mesh can be cut to size, and even steel wool, any air intakes, any places where there's a small opening in your garage or anything like that, where a power line's coming in, or even dryer vents, it's good to stuff the steel wool around the edges there and make sure you have the type of dryer vent that opens and closes. So preventing them from getting into any type of generator or anything like that. Look for any air intake ports, anything like that on an RV. There's so many different possible places they can get in. So you just want to make sure you go around and make sure that you plug each hole, and then put yourself a note that you have to unplug each hole as you start to use any of this equipment or any of these vehicles if it's long-term storage. Now, a friend of mine lived next to a restaurant, and around that restaurant there were some very large dumpsters, and there was a lot of food in there, so it attracted some really large rodents. And he asked me what did I recommend for keeping the rats from getting into his trash cans, because they were quite large. Not as big as a cat, but they were large rats. And I told him put some motion sensing light, battery operated, and I gave him the link on Amazon, and he put those on his trash can. So anytime a rat got even close to his trash can, it tripped the light sensor off and the motion sensor, and the rats would scurry away. He put out a little nighttime camera so he could see what happened, but as soon as the light cut on, the rats would scurry away. So it's kind of like the same effect with roaches. Once you flick the light on, they all scurry away. So just take a look in the description. I'll put a couple links in there to some small battery-powered motion sensing lights with some two-sided tape you can just stick on your trash can. Now, this is not going to work for small field mice. It's going to take something a little bit larger, but if you are having a problem with very large rodents, this will definitely help keep them out of your trash cans. Now, if you're storing a vehicle long-term, putting a water moat around each tire is a great idea. If you take the rubberized trash can lids, you can actually drive over them and the edges will flip back up. You can fill those with water, and that will act kind of as a water moat to keep rodents from getting to the tires, because once they make it to the tire, it's very easy for them to get into the fender wells, make it to the engine, and ultimately into the finished areas of the car or RV. So one problem with a generator my dad once had, some rodents got into it and chewed on some of the wires. So if you take some aluminum foil and wrap it on anything, because there is an edible component, they say that it's like a soy-based product or something like that that some wires have included in with the plastics and rubber, so it makes it semi-edible. So wrapping those with just some common aluminum foil, you don't have to worry about anything getting overheated in something like a generator or anything like that. If you're storing something long-term, you could wrap some of the wires, coils, and things like that with a little bit of aluminum foil, and that will prevent them from chewing on the wires. So it can do a huge amount of damage, and you can't really figure out what's going on, but you can have electrical problems, you can have fluid leaks. So any type of car, RV, generator that you're storing long term, wrapping it with aluminum foil can be a great way to keep mice and rodents from chewing on the wires if they do make it to the engine component. So the next segment that I'm going to talk about engine and mechanical protection. Now this is a very common idea that people have, but it's really important to do this, is starting the engine at least once a week, letting it heat up. The vibration and the heat can drive rodents out. So doing that is a great idea, because if you don't, rodents can live in a vehicle, generator, RV for years and years, and you won't even know they're there. So just have a habit of doing that, and it's good for your engine too. Now, if you're having the problem inside your garage, this is something you could do interior in a garage or wherever you store your vehicle, but not necessarily outside, because you would have a big problem with rain and things like that. But leaving the hood up while it's parked in the garage, it can provide a lot of light into that area, and that can feel unsafe to rodents. So just letting up the hood, if you're having that problem in the cooler months, can really keep rodents from starting to build a nest there. They feel unsafe when that hood's up and all that light's coming in. Now, using cayenne pepper to spray on the engines is a great thing to do. You can mix it with 2 tablespoons of the cayenne pepper and mix it with Castile soap, about 3 tablespoons. Put it in your quart-size sprayer and then spray the engine bays around the tires, and that heat from the cayenne pepper powder will keep them away. And you can actually double it or triple it if your rodent problem is really severe. Now, putting traps around your vehicle is a great idea, but you want to make sure that your pets can't get to it, or small children. That you can take these food containers and cut a small round hole in the side if you're dealing with some very small field mice or something like that. Put a sticky glue trap in it, maybe one a little bit taller. You could use a snap trap. You just want to make sure that pets, cats, dogs, things like that cannot get to the trap. You could temporarily put it in the trunk of the car, check it periodically to make sure, because the smell from a deceased rodent would become very intolerable. You could put it in the engine bay as long as you write yourself a note to make sure you don't leave something like this in here, because it would get overheated, melt, and possibly cause a fire. So making some of these type of traps and then putting something inside of it like a snap trap or the glue board, as I mentioned before, can really work well, and you don't have to buy some of the more expensive traps. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is garage, shed, or place wherever you're storing your vehicle, a building, that type of protection. One of the first things I'm going to talk about is using expanding foam. Once you put the expanding foam in there, if you take just a piece of steel wool and put over the end of it and stick it to the end of the expanding foam, it makes it very hard for any of the rodents to chew through it. If you just do expanding foam alone, a lot of times rodents can make their way through it. So adding this metallic to the end of it, this metallic material, the steel wool, it makes it very difficult for them to chew through it. Now, a lot of times at restaurants, you will see a little small black box outside of the building, sometimes around where they store their trash and things like that. But those are rodent traps, and it prevents the rodents from making it inside the building. So whether you have a garage, shed, storage area, or even under the bottom of the RV, placing some boxes like that, under homemade boxes, under any of those areas can stop the rodents before they make it inside. So having traps on the outside is a great idea. Just make sure that whatever you're using is waterproof, because these can often get wet from a heavy rain, the water washing, anything like that, humidity. So whatever type of trap you're using, just make sure it's resistant to moisture. Now, diatomaceous earth is really made for insects in the garden, but it can be an irritant to rodents, and I would recommend that anywhere you have a doorway, a garage, a storage building, you can put diatomaceous earth around the outside of it. You may have to reapply it after a heavy rain, but this can be an irritant to most rodents. So it's safe for humans. Just make sure as you're putting out that you're wearing a mask, and don't put it out on a windy day. Now, the next one is about perimeter defense on all these possible points. It's one of those things that you have to do just a few things to make sure that rodents, you make it as inhospitable as possible. The first thing I'm going to talk about is cutting grass low anywhere that you're storing vehicles, because tall grasses is a perfect place for rodents to hide. Now next is firewood. If you have a wood burning fireplace or stove, you're probably going to have a wood pile somewhere near your home, but this is a major nesting area for rodents. It provides a place of protection, place from the elements they can hide into, because normally a lot of times wood piles are covered to keep them from getting wet. So just make sure that you keep this away from anywhere you're parking or storing vehicles or equipment. Now if you're like me and you like putting out mulch, you want to make sure that you keep it away from your storage buildings and garages, because mulch can be the perfect environment for rodents to get into. They can burrow under it, they can use it for nesting material. It's better to use gravel if you're having a problem with rodents around those areas. So opt for gravel, pea gravel, many types of gravel you can buy at most hardware stores, but just stay away from the mulches and the straws, because that's the perfect environment for rodents to take up housekeeping. So if you're having this problem around your shed or garage, detached or attached to your home, spraying with this product right here is incredibly effective. It's actually made for mosquitoes, but it's extremely strong garlic smell. It's the strongest garlic I've ever smelled. You can't even make a garlic powder smell like this. I don't know how they did it, but it's just pure garlic. And if you add these two together, peppermint and garlic, and then use your sprayer to go around the perimeter of the buildings, that can help repel mice and rats. But again, this was originally designed, I found it for a mosquito video I had done in the past, but combining these two together will really create a strong effective barrier. Putting out, maybe spraying once every 2 weeks will really help, but this will linger for quite a while. Now, one thing that rodents really don't like is a dry environment. If the RV or vehicle you have is very moist inside, they can burrow into some of the insulation and things like that. So putting a dehumidifier in an RV and having it running all the time, also putting moisture absorbers in cars if you park them outside, but just keeping it as dry as possible, because moisture is a way for the rodents to survive. So making it as inhospitable as possible by keeping it very dry on the interior. So guys, if you want to take a look at that 13-page, 250 tips to keep the rodents out of your cars, trucks, RVs, lawn equipment, generators, whatever, you can take a look at that. If you're already a member of the Patreon, you can download this for free, save it to your device, go through it. But again, there's 250 separate pieces of advice I put together. It took me several hours to do this, but all of these have a lot of effective things going on to keep the rodents from destroying your vehicle and having to end up in the repair shop for whatever the cost. Guys, I really appreciate you watching. If you want to help the channel grow, you can become a member of the Patreon. It's only a few dollars a month, and that really helps me quite a bit. And I really appreciate you watching. Every single view means a lot to me. So guys, have a great day.